founders. Somebody with a very nice and inspiring mission to help women in innovation technology get more equitable chances. They're a really impressive network of 65,000 entrepreneurs, women. So this, I think, deserves applause by itself. And they try to bring these chances in two ways. So first of all, of course, they have an accelerator where they try to make the female founding startups basically founding ready. On the other way, they want to help corporates and their investor plans to kind of create more inclusive culture. And on a personal note, Amelia is also very passionate, of course, about mentoring and about entrepreneurship, but she's also, as a digital marketing expert, very much passionate about the storytelling, as well new work and about leadership in general.
Yeah. Thank you.
So pleasure to... Pleasure to talk to you all. And the first question goes to you, Heike. So at Raiffeisen International, you're very much focusing on embracing equity. So what are your motivations behind that, and how do you tackle the topic?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for having me. It's a big pleasure talking in this round. I mean, it's very obvious that there is no way not to do it, because what would the people think if we, and in particular, how would we ever attract women if we would not tackle that topic? I mean, we have roughly 50% of females in our organization, like in Vienna. If we look at the entire group in 13 countries, it's also even a little bit more than 50%. And certainly the question how we create equal opportunities, but then also how we can see it, that it unfolds, is super important. Because otherwise women might say, and good talents would say, why should I join? Why should I be in that organization? Why should I devote so much of my time and my efforts into this organization if I do not see that I can prosper in this company? So it's very natural that we have to tackle the topic. How do we do that? I mean, I can see it even more, as I said, we are in 13 different countries. And we can see that the circumstances in the countries are just so different. So we can see that also the society and everything around is having a big impact. Though there are some, I would say, commonalities that we can see across the different countries. And it has to do a lot with the organizational culture and the norms and sort of the pictures that we have in an organization and in a society of what is an appropriate job, how does management, for instance, go together with social gender roles, and so on and so forth. And that plays in two directions. The one that, do we have women who really are eager to apply, for instance, for leadership roles, or would they, due to whatever reasons, refrain from it? And do we see that we have a very strict norm also within the leaders who take certain decisions and point women or men to positions? Do they also see, diverse career paths and some experiences as valuable, or is it very strict that you only have a very streamlined career? So I think this is a big part of our work, to actually work on those, let's say, mental models, on those role models, on the norms, but then also to translate them into actions when it really comes to the decision. And that is where we are also focusing a lot on how we set up processes actually for recruitment, and in particular, the higher you go in the hierarchy level, the more we look at this. And this goes up until the executive search companies. I have to say they play a very crucial role, because they also have their ideas of what is an appropriate person and career and so on and so forth. So I would say we tackle it from a very broad perspective, culture, succession pipeline, up until the moment of decision. And we work with data. In a bank, everything is with data. You cannot do it in any other way. And I also saw it is very important to be able to talk figures and to show, because very, very quickly I heard, since you're here, men don't have a chance for career anymore, right? And then I said, well, let's look at the data, and only because you can name 2-3 women who got a very good job, I can name you another 4 or 5 men who got promoted as well. So it's then very easy to sort of get distracted also, or maybe belittle the topic if you do not have the numbers right, and you cannot explain the topic holistically, I would say.
Thank you very much, Heike. So we've heard that working on mental models, processes, and also, being very honest and looking in data is very important in the corporate world. Talking about data, I will now, tell you a very shocking figure, and then the question goes to you, Selma. Only 0.7%, so it's not 7%, it's 0.7% of VC funding goes to female founders. Selma, how could we remedy this situation?
Well, the first thing is we have the data, which is already, good part of that, and we have the numbers. We knew that, but without the data, nothing is happening. This is the 0.7 is really the figure in Europe. So all the VC money that is invested into only female-led female-only startups is 0.7 in Europe, and it's about 2% worldwide. When we look at male-only startups, it's 90%. So I just did a TED talk called Invest Like a Girl, really playing on all the biases and all the feelings that we have around it, and also going through the gender and issues and the biases and everything that is happening there. And I call this the 90-2 ratio. And which is a terrible figure. I mean, we really have to admit that, and it's a terrible figure in three levels. On 3 levels. One, I have a son and a daughter, and the point is that my son, simply because of his gender, he would be in the group that will receive 90% of the money, and my daughter, simply by her gender, will belong to the group that receives only 2% of the money. I have an issue with that. I don't know how about you, but I have an issue with that. Second point, it is on the investment side. We know that investing into female founders and female-led startups brings more money, double the return. There is enough stats that show that this is a smarter investment. So if we live in a data-driven world and investment is data-driven, one would consider that investors will invest more money into female founders and female-only startups, which is not the case. So common knowledge is not necessarily common practice, but we need to talk about it and to make sure that it's visible. So it is on a personal level an issue. It is an issue for investors, but it's also an issue for our society. At the moment, we are wasting the potential. We are not using 50% of the potential to create the innovation, to create the solutions for the grand challenges of our time. And we have no time. I mean, everybody is talking about climate change, all the things pressuring that are there, and we are saying, nah, we're not going to invest into women. We don't care about innovation that they're going to bring. So we need, as a society, we need to start looking at these things. But just having the facts and having the numbers now already shows that we have the situation. But we also know that the number of unicorns, female-led unicorns, has changed dramatically from 2019 to 2021. So 2021, 2019 and 2021. So we see a huge change that is happening there, but we can really go into more details onto how we are tackling it and how we're working on having more investments into startups. But it's a terrible numbers. But every time I speak and I do workshops and I work with women, I simply say, you're an exception, deal with it. Simple as that. It's not, I don't see that as a problem. At the moment, as a female founder, you're an exception. But you can look at it and say, I'm an example and a role model. So it's an attitude story.
Thank you very much, Selma. It's a very good message. Take it as an attitude, and also, like you've mentioned, a very, very important point, how much potential to tackle the big societal challenges is lost by overlooking this huge part of the talent pool, right? And I think, Amelia, it goes well with the next question to you. How do you, as female founders, help bridge this gap and bring more female founders into the VCs and actually just more talent into the whole startup scene?
Yeah, I can see we're going to love data on this panel. But to Selma's point, I mean, I think what's even more concerning, we at Female Founders, we always look at a report called Atomico State of European Tech. And this is a report that goes out every year. And I think this year what was very, very concerning is that the percent of funding for female-led ventures went from 3% in 2018, 3%, which is also not a great number, to under this 1%, which is seeing that trend go down is something for us that's a huge, huge red flag. And so we're looking basically at this topic in a couple different ways. The first way is we have an accelerator program focused on helping female-led ventures to become investment ready. What does exactly investment ready mean? This means that they are maybe pre-seed, seed, they're looking to raise their first major institutional round of investment. And how we help them is we look at how can we support them. We can go into this a little bit more later, but how can we look at helping them with pitching? How can we support them in term sheet negotiations? Because a lot of times term sheet negotiations is something completely new, and maybe they get it taken advantage of if they don't understand all of this. So that's the one way that we do this. The other way is we specifically have a program called Lead F. It's specifically focused on helping female, specifically founders, but also women leaders that are in corporate innovation, startups, etc., to really support them on their leadership journey. And a lot of the times we talk about these skill sets of soft skills. I'm glad that this is starting to move towards more human skills, because these are really the skills that are going to make major changes in organizations, and especially with everything that's going on with climate change. We need leaders that can communicate, that can really stick up for themselves, but also for their teams. And what's really great with that particular program is that we help them, because a lot of these leaders are actually in male-dominated spaces. So we help them specifically work through things like power dynamics, to how do you present yourself and how do you be more visible? Because a lot of the times we shy away, especially females, from being more confident and having a personal brand and putting the skills that we have out there. So those are really the two major things that I would say we're doing at Female Founders.
Thanks a lot, Amelia. Daniel, well, I have a feeling now that we will talk about more about the importance of data here. But for somebody coming from procurement, there is a strong focus on costs. Why should equity matter at all in supply choice?
Yeah. Maybe to give this a little context, Porsche Holding is not the sports car manufacturer, nor are we the owner company of Volkswagen, the share. Yeah, but we are actually an automotive sales company in 29 countries, 34,000 employees, and 24 billion euro turnover. So that's the context where we are working in. And we in procurement, we don't buy the cars, we buy everything around, which is still 1.3 billion euro with a lot of suppliers. But just like with the investment capital, also this 1.3 billion, every euro has an impact, right? When it flows to the economy. And yeah, it's basically, since last year, we have one of our 5 core awarding principles, and that's where you have a leverage in procurement, is sustainability. And what's behind is that every supplier above 50,000 euro has to be, or a CSR data rating score has to be included into the awarding process and has to be considered. And this is now really a kind of a rule, and it's about rules and principles that you need to get a drive to push SDG goals also in procurement.
I mean, that's good to hear, right? I mean, even if there is no intrinsic motivation, right? Now, doing good is good for business. There is also commercial implication. But what do you as Porsche Holding do on intrinsic level? I mean, what do you do to embrace equity within your organization?
Yeah, I think you can, on the one hand side, you can make rules, KPIs, and that's absolutely necessary. But I think the goal would be the transformation, right? And also the mindset and culture transformation, so that it really feels natural to embrace equity. And I'm now at Porsche Holding since 8 years, and I can really say that now you can feel it. So it's not only about talking anymore and like an obligatory thing that we have to do. Now you can really feel it. And to give a specific example, we had the whole leadership team of Porsche Holding, which are really a lot of people. had to do a 2 days or a 1 day, 2 half days workshop on diversity. And I had the pleasure to be in a group with 2 board members, and they would have 1,000 things to do, right, at the same time, but they didn't miss a minute. Were actively participating, were also role models, and you could also feel that they live this topic and not only talk about it.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So we've heard that equity becomes more and more important in supplier choice. But what about recruitment, Heike? What are the specific recruitment challenges when it comes to equity, and how can we tackle the bias and create more equitable, not only more equal opportunities for the candidates?
Well, I mean, the recruiting is really an interesting topic to look at. What we realized is that if you look at, and now let's talk about recruiting and nomination decisions of high-ranked positions. And what we usually do is we have a profile, and then we say what is the position about, and then what are the like qualifications that we need, and then we screen the vita, and we look at the people, and sort of we look into the past of the people, and then we sort of try to project the future, right? So we sort of make an assumption based on what the person has done in order to know what the future will bring. And we can see that a lot of things are going on in the heads of decision makers in that process, because they are, of course, wanting to make the least risky decision, if you will. They want to have as many data points as they can in order to project and sort of have the safest bet, if you will. And we can see in particular where you wouldn't have had women before. And what is important to say, maybe the anchor point is oftentimes the person that was leaving the job before. And then if you would have a person coming in that is different, say you have never had a woman in that position, maybe say even it's not the streamlined career that you have, it's automatically considered a risky decision. And you can see how what was in the beginning maybe an interesting like characteristic or competence, throughout the process it fades away because it's you start the negotiation. Yeah, but are you sure? And what if? And does that play out? So it's very, very difficult, or it's very interesting to observe those processes. So what did we do? I realized very soon that I need to devote more time with the manager, the decision-making managers in the beginning, to say, what is it really that you're looking at? I mean, what is it really, really, really what you need? And tell me like the 3 most important things that you really need for this position, and let's stick to them and not change it along the way, because then, yeah, but this, I forgot. So it's like really making this idea of what is it that is distinct and that you really need. And then also we added some anonymous tasks, and that was super interesting. So we asked the participants of the hearing to hand in a strategy paper up front and to do it anonymized. And we asked the assessors to say, now give it a like rate it, and then we have the presentation in the hearing. And so the first thing they try to do is to find out who was had which one, and then we said, okay, we also take out all of the formatting and everything, so make it sure that they do not get it. And then there was so big ahas, because when sometimes it was really that the preferred candidates, or let's say the ones that you would have expected, they didn't hand in the best strategy papers. But then in the end, the question was, yeah, but I mean, is it so important? So then you again have those discussions. And I think it is a process, because you sort of, with those elements, you make people aware of what is happening in the decision. You cannot completely get rid of it, because of course such a decision is always something that also has to do with the personal decision in the end. But what I did realize is that it makes people think about, okay, now it's happening. Now I understand what you were talking about earlier, because I see myself switching my argumentation along the process, and this helped a lot. And I also realized that that having certain targets, like gender targets, at this moment in time, is somehow supporting, because then they dare to take the additional risk that they feel. They somehow can also delegate a little bit and say, okay, it's not only me, but it's also because it's required, and it is okay to take that certain risk, and say I go for a more unconventional maybe. And here it's always the discussion: what is the same qualification? I have never met two candidates with exactly the same qualification, right? But the question how you value which kind of qualification and what is really needed for a certain job, and how you can also envisage someone with a different experience actually perfectly matching that role, that is actually the conversations we need to have. And that is what sort of triggers the people also in their mindsets. And it's a long way to go, but it's definitely worthwhile, and it's working if you if you're consistent with it, I would say, and if you keep on it. They sometimes they don't want to have me in processes anymore, but but I would say all of the decisions where the decision makers felt it was risky now are turning out to be really good decisions, and they remember it, and then it creates a certain momentum.
Thank you very much, Heike, for sharing this. I think you can relate to some part of the story. I mean, it's also in procurement, risk is a very, very important criteria, right? And a driver of the decision making. You have more than 40,000 suppliers, so not only 1.3 billion to manage, but also 40,000 suppliers. How can you afford to consider equity as a criteria at scale?
Data. No, but yeah, it's basically Porsche Holding also tends to have very flat and compact structures. One of my colleagues is there. I hope she can confirm it. And it's like this T approach. So the broad base of our suppliers, we need to check them in a automatized way with data. So we have a CSR data provider, and technically it looks like this, that we automatically get a CSR score for our awardings into our e-procurement suite, and then it has to be considered by the procurement responsibles and by all decision makers. But the T approach also means to go in depth when you have a big impact. So suppliers with big volumes and in critical categories where we really analyze more deeply and doing this with audits and also with gathering specific data to make our decisions better. So for us, it's really about decision making and awarding the right suppliers, developing those suppliers into the right direction.
Okay, why do you care as Porsche Holding? I mean, you know, it's your supplier. Is there anything that you can lose if you are working with suppliers who are basically having irresponsible labor practices, for example?
I think the Volkswagen concern since 2015 knows very well risks that can arise, and a lot. So I joined the company 2015 September, the month of Dieselgate, and I experienced it completely. And there was as I said, a huge transformation, and I think it's a lot about risk mitigation as well, but it's already part of our DNA as well. And that's also something I really like, and I also want to push personally forward.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Amelia, how could we ensure that women get fair chance when it comes to funding? And do women really need to prepare differently for pitching and for negotiations?
I don't want to say yes. But I look at it this way. I think in terms of fundraising, there's a couple things that have to change. The first thing is also looking at the VC landscape and who are actually the people that are investing in startups. Because investment decisions a lot of the times are personal. Maybe it's their own personal money or it's the firm's money. Anyways, you invest in the people that you think are going to succeed, whatever in your mind success looks like. So there is, when I look at it from the VC point of view, it's looking at it in terms of how can we look at unconscious bias differently? Because you can do all the unconscious bias training in the world, and I think it's something definitely very beneficial. We should be aware of what biases we have, but at the end of the day, it's bringing in, almost like what Heike was talking about, bringing in these bias disruptors to change processes and ways of how they're doing investments. So for an example, maybe it's not one partner, but having multiple different people in the conversation to get feedback on this potential deal. This could be also having more, of course, females at the investment table, because a lot of times we invest in people that we believe are going to succeed. The other thing in terms of female founders, right? So I think we're super proud at female founders because last year, when looking at our alumni, raised in total 8.9 million euros in 2022, and that's no small feat. And the way that we coach them and help them is, yes, you have to look at, almost like you were saying, Selma, you are an exception in a lot of ways. So when it comes to, for example, your pitching, what's most important also for male and for female is that you have a specific business case and you're showing the true value of your startup. But in Q&A, these are going to be potentially different questions. A lot of the times for example, for men, they get the promotional questions. So for example, what's your long-term vision? How are you going to succeed? Questions that really help to showcase the potential and the value of their startup, versus a lot of times females will get questions in terms of how X, Y, and Z will affect your startup. Or the question that unfortunately a lot of female founders get is pregnancy. What happens if you get pregnant, right? We shouldn't ask this question. This question shouldn't come up. Unfortunately, a lot of the female founders that we have coached say that they have got this question before. Of course, you can make the decision as a founder to say, you know what, if they ask me this question, maybe this showcases isn't the investor I want to work with. But being a female founder, you have to be prepared for that question in terms of how am I going to answer this question if this question arises? So there is a lot of preparation in terms of what type of questions will I get asked and how can I make sure that I'm really fighting for my business and I'm going to have to give in maybe at times 110%.
Thank you. So very interesting point, being asked different questions and unconscious bias. So basically, Selma, advice from your side, how should women tackle the unconscious bias on the investor side?
I mean, as you just said, it's really true. And we know that, when you have a man and a woman present exactly the same slides with exactly the same language, the man would get more funding than the woman. Exactly the same content. But it's still these biases. And this is what you were talking about. When it's anonymous, then the results are very different. And at the end of the day, it is about this risk mitigation. Why do you do something that I have not done before? And you have to get into the habit of doing so. And it is very simple. Investing at a very early stage is based on trust. And you trust what you know. That's very human. That's nothing mean or anything like that. So with having that in mind, it is logical that men would tend to invest into the startups the way we see them currently. I mean, I must say, I've been around for 20 years in the startup ecosystem and creating it. And we had the same story with the male startups at the very beginning. How do you pitch and how do you fund and all of these stories, only that now in the meantime, there's a lot of support and we have women coming in and then the support is then adding to that. But that was the same story. And the same story I had, 10 years ago when we started the business angel community. What is a business angel? What do you do? How do you invest? What are the questions? So it is a process that we are going through, and we are just at the next stage of that process. And I'm very happy that we are finally there. But it is something that is very clear. The point is that you have to be aware. Of course, I mean, imagine if you were to invest 100,000. You have 100,000, and you're going to invest, and you have a female founder that is in the age that she's going to have most probably have a child, or maybe have a child. Of course, you want to know. How is she going to deal with that? It's very simple. It's not mean. That's the point. This is business. So on one thing is the gender story. They are not allowed to ask me that question. But I have one of my colleagues, my friends, is an amazing entrepreneur. She went through the fundraising while she was 8 months pregnant and saying, I want to have all the money on my account before I get the baby. I'll get the baby, and after 6 months, I'll go back to work and I'll do the startup. But she had a plan and she had the money, no problem. It is about dealing with the situation. So please stop, understanding the things on a personal level. When it's about business, it is about business. It is a mitigation risk, and it is about changing and breaking those barriers. We have to be aware how things were before, and to be honest, when I after the break I had with my, I had my children and I took some time off. I mean, I was 6 months unemployed, although I was theoretically the perfect candidate everybody wanted. But nobody wanted a woman with 2 kids, I mean, 2 babies. Clearly, that was the reason why I couldn't get the management position. We live in a time today where my niece got promoted. I mean, she's working really on a top level US company on the strategic management, really top CEO level. She got promoted every time she got a baby. So this is a new world we are living in. I can, one thing I can tell you, there's never been a better time to be a woman than today. So please take that into account. So yes, we do have issues, and you get prepared. If you're a startup, you get prepared and you get to know the questions. You learn how to answer those questions so that to turn them into the promotional questions. You learn how to find the companies where you want to work because they respect your values and who you are. And then, of course, I'm working on the other hand on the investor side and making sure that we have more women and all of the potential that is there. But I don't know if that's part of, I'm sorry, I could, spend the next 3 days, talking about this. It's like,
Well, thank
I'm
you.
really, really very passionate about this.
Well, thank you very much for bringing passion and the real perspective, and also, a little bit of inspiration. Thanks a lot. So, Heike, the question to you: you have spent the most of your career actually on a research side, tackling the topics of diversity and inclusion, and then you have moved to the corporate. What were the most surprising insights? Was there an aha moment, like, okay, I have actually perceived it differently from the other side?
Well, actually, what I was always struggling with were the studies saying, well, if you put women, for instance, in a team or in a top management team, then this and that changes. And I had difficulties because I said, so why? I mean, what's the deal here? Would you then say because women are so different by nature, or what is it? And also, I was doing a lot of career studies, and I said, but well, if you look at and that was 10, 15 years ago, if you would look at the career trajectories of the women in those top positions, they were just so similar to their male ones. So why would you assume that? So I was sort of very critical, and I thought I would be interested in opening that black box. And back in the academia, I was trying to sneak in and say, let me participate. I'm just observing, and but of course that's very difficult. So now I'm observing, and what I underestimated is actually it's not so much about like women by nature being so different, but the let's say the expectations and the perceptions, they are like what matters, and they do change the way things are dealt with in certain teams. And you can see that there is a difference if you have an all male team, and then if I'm the only woman, or if you see then others entering in, or I can see how people are talking to me versus, and I wouldn't say it's because of me, not because of my nature, but because of what is portrayed to me. And that was my big aha, in the sense of okay, so that's part of the impact that it has if you have gender diverse teams. It's not this biologistic natural thing argument, but it's like it obviously makes a difference because you attribute, or women are attributed other, let's say, expectations and roles, no matter what they do. But it does do something, and those dynamics I can very much now experience them and see what could be behind, and why it makes a difference also on whether the outcomes of a certain, let's say, team that is gender diverse versus homogeneous. That was, I just didn't get it from a rational point of view, but then when I experience it, it's different.
Yes, please, Selma.
I'm sorry, it's like
This is ideal situation where I don't have to even do anything.
No, but I think that it's really this social pressure that is out there, that we are not even aware of it. And it's like I'm 55 years old and I'm just realizing things that I heard that when I was a girl. And that's the fact. I mean, this is exactly, I have to go back to my TED talk, Invest Like a Girl. I would really appreciate if you take a look at it, because I'm talking about these things that I'm passionate about. But this is something, I was on the cover page of a magazine, and the title was Because I'm a Girl, weil ich ein Mädchen bin. And I was totally upset. I was totally upset with the journalist. I just couldn't understand, how could she say that I'm a girl? Because it felt diminishing. To me, it felt something bad. It felt diminishing. It felt small. I really felt taken out from my position, which was basically, she wanted to say that was something positive, but to me, it was terrible. And it took me years. I didn't want to talk to her, to be honest, until, later on, I had some discussion and realizing these, this really social pictures that we have, and this is exactly what I'm trying to do, and this is what my job today is, to go out and speak and build awareness and capacity in terms of what does it mean, be a girl, an investor, these roles, these social pictures that we have there, and I'm creating a world where that should have a totally different meaning. But just really, we have to be aware what we are carrying. And being in an international community the way we are here today, we all have different upbringings and different traditions, but still, on average, it is still the same story if you're a woman or a man. We have beautiful new generations that look at it totally differently, but at least in my generation, it was very, very fixed.
Thank you, Selma. Daniel, how are you?
Fine.
Well, you seem quite comfortable sitting with us talking about equity. How is that?
I think you always feel comfortable with what you can identify yourself with. And I think equity, I want to identify it and myself with equity as a core value. And I think equity has such a broad range. The gender topic that we are talking about is one very important dimension of it, but I think it's way bigger than that. And all of us are at a certain stage here due to the coincidence of birth, right? So where we are, and we had free access to education, to health system. Of course, you can talk about quality there, but still so much things that a lot of people in this world don't have. And I think that those are all factors that you need to consider when it's about equity, and that's something I want to do in my personal and also in my professional life.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Amelia, a question to you. Do you think anything, I mean, with all due respect to Daniel, do you think that corporates could learn something from startup when it comes to processes or practices of bringing equity?
I think it really depends on who the corporate is and who the startup is. The reason I say this is because when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, there's corporates that do it really well and there's startups that do it really well. But there's also both that do it very, very badly. But I'll say the two things. The first thing being, I think where startups sometimes shine is that they do have limited resources. And a lot of times DE&I, especially in big corporations, you have a specific team, a specific head, and they stay in the corner. And I think we were talking about this before, Heike, that you would have this dedicated DE&I person and say, oh, if you have a DE&I question, you go to this person. And what's sometimes great about startups is you don't have this specific person, and maybe you don't have a specific team that's focused on it. So this topic of equity and inclusion starts from the top, from the founders, dripples down to everyone in the team. So they look at, I'm an engineering manager, but I think it's really important if we have a diverse team. And I think that's what's really, really important, no matter if you're a corporate or a startup, that this isn't something that sits in a silo. This is something that everyone should be really baking into their day-to-day, whether that be performance reviews, things like this. And I think the other thing that's super important is also the agility and the speed to change things and the willingness. I think a lot of times with startups, they're open to changing things and trying new directions. And especially when it comes to doing, let's just say, an employee engagement survey, sometimes maybe the status is that corporates move slowly. Again, I've only worked in one corporate in my life, so I can only speak to this one. But generally speaking, everyone looks to startups because there's innovative, they're not scared to change directions. And I think this is also something to take for diversity, equity, inclusion, to say, hey, we're running this mentoring program, and maybe it's been 6 months or a year and no one's joining it and no one finds it useful. Okay, let's pivot and let's try something else. But I think at the end of the day, no matter if you're from a corporate or from a startup, there's a quote, but I'm forgetting it. But at the end of the day, your culture bakes down to the worst behavior that a leader will accept. So no matter where you are, if you're a leader, it is your responsibility to create a culture and a team that feels that sense of belonging and inclusion.
Thank you very much. Also very inspiring, and maybe, for the last bit of inspiration from you, going to you back, Selma, what world do you dream of? Tough one, right?
Oh, I have a very clear vision. One thing that I would like to see many of you become investors, female investors. I would like to see many of you consider yourself being an investor in yourself, investor in your future, investor in your family, but also investing into startups. If you start being investor, because this is how the whole business angel ecosystem has started, is you had males, CEOs mostly of corporates, kind of having some cash aside and starting investing into startup. And then it became what it is today. So we have the same situation here. We have smart, intelligent, capable, amazing women that can become those investors that will change the world for those female founders, and that will bring the diversity that we all need to have. At the European Business Angel Network, we have the Manifesto for Gender Balanced Investing, and we want to have 30% of the investors in the networks to be women. And we know that is possible, or I'm convinced it is possible. And I dream of a world where, being a woman, or I dream of a world where we can say invest like a girl is something that is really courageous and brave and compassionate and caring, but it is a long-term investment strategy.
Fantastic. Now we will move to some questions from the audience. Maybe somebody from the live audience, because we will wait for a few seconds to see if there is somebody from joining in us online. So we're open to questions now.
If I can just go back to the networking subject.
Absolutely, with pleasure.
One of the things that we're, in terms of the CEOs and the success that they have, and how you kind of deal with that, one of the issues that we have is really how women perceive networking in terms of business. And so most of the time, women will tend to do their work and do their job. And, like spending time on a networking event is just a pure waste of time. But we have to be aware, the higher you go on the level, the things that you need to do is about networks. It's about making business happen. Bringing money, bringing businesses is only happening based on trust. And trust is built when you know people and when you meet them. So if you're sitting in your corner office, however beautiful and big it is, but you're always there, that is not going to happen. So really, and these are the networks that are really important to kind of build on that, is how can you build that confidence and realize that networking is part of your job. And you have to make it somehow happen. If it's, lunchtime, and you cannot make it in the evening, make sure that you have your lunchtime meetings or whatever to meet people outside of your company. But just make sure that networking is part of your business. Just to that, what you were talking.
We appreciate the advice. Yes, Nina, please. You would need a mic. Daniel, may I? Oh, gentlemen.
Yeah, I would have a question. Very often with younger colleagues, I would observe maybe it goes in the direction of equality versus equity. And I think we mentioned before this preparing for the power games and so on, that they are saying basically, do I really want this? I don't want to go there. I don't want to play these power games and this culture. And do you have any recommendations how we can support them more in terms of going in the direction of equity and not only equality?
Don't play that game. There are 8 billion people out there. Find those that fit your needs.
And I would say sometimes it is portrayed worse than it is. I remember that I was witnessing a podium discussion, and it was all male, and they were talking about being in supervisory boards, and they were using terms like it's a fight, and it's so, like, they were using all those terms where you would say, okay. But then, so if you talk to them off record, or if you experience more of it, then you realize maybe it's just also a matter of how it is portrayed and how it is described, and you can make it different. You do not have to be all too much afraid of how difficult it is. You can make it, and then you can also make the difference of saying, I do not play all of those games, but I'm also not letting you tell me what is too frightening for me.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because we talk about power games and power dynamics. It's what game do you want to play? And is this worth for me to go down this path, or does it make sense? Because there are, unfortunately, I've seen it also that some startups are very toxic in their culture, and sometimes a couple people can't change that. So then it comes down to this decision of, do I want to stay and play this game and potentially change something, or at this point, is it not worth it?
If I could just, since I got children, it was always clear that I am a mom, and that my children have my phone number. They can call me anytime. They will pop into any of my meetings. And, that was like 20, 25 years ago. That was a very, very different world. But that was me. And then what happens is that you attract people that appreciate that, or at least can live with that. And I think that's the point. So yes, of course, it is about you deciding on how much of these power games you want to play, but it is also deciding, as you just said, where do you want to do that? And I think it is about us bringing our different styles, all of us, each of us, in an authentic way. As you just said, it's not that power game, it's you deciding where you want to go and who you want to be.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. So there is a little bit of interest about the case you have mentioned, Selma, about your friend that that raised funds in 8 months of pregnancy. So basically, there is a curiosity around what happened next. So that she used the funds to build her business. Was the business successful? Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, she's an amazing, founder, and her business is running, and she's doing amazing and promoting. I mean, she has 4 kids. She's a small thing like this. She has 4 kids, but she's a force that you cannot miss. And, and it's simply the way she put it. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's when you go out there and say, yes, I am pregnant. And yes, I have found a way how to deal with it. My partner's going to take over. I will do this. You have a plan. Yes, of course, people do not ask men yet when they're going to have, because they are not going to be pregnant and be the few first months. But it is just about dealing with the situation and saying, this is what is going to happen and how I'm going to work it out. And I have another startup that did her Series B having twins. So Series B funding, so that's really millions and millions, and that's really big data and all of that. And it works. because she had a plan. She said, this is how I'm going to do it. And it's just standing for who you are and not trying to hide it and not trying to say, I'm a woman and I'm pregnant. No, go say, that's me. Love me for who I am.
Thank you, Selma. So, question for Daniel from my side. What would you do? You have two candidates for the job. I mean, two ladies in your team. One who would you consider up for promotion is just getting married. How would you react on that? Would that influence your promotion decision? Sorry, I know him a little bit. I'm putting him on the spot spontaneously.
We talked about those biases, right? And it's good that if they are conscious, but in this case, I really try to absolutely block any thought on pregnancy, on what the future could look like. And I had also or have great experience with doing this. And from my perspective, so I'm also a father of two children, and they are the hardest training you can get in your life. And you learn such a lot of things. And I have one of my team leads is part-time mother of two kids. And she's really a role model, and she's incredibly efficient. And that's what I really also experienced. And that's why, as you said, I wouldn't consider this as a bad thing when somebody is getting children. Children are needed in our society. We need more children. And that's why, I could really say I try to block this and not consider this, because the work will anyway be done in a certain way, and you have to arrange it, you have to manage it. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. That was
very Austrian. I mean, true. Like the question is very Austrian. I mean, you don't have that in other countries.
Yeah.
So
But it's also it's about what is the default version that goes in your mind, and that is, okay, the woman then is pregnant, then she will be off for a long time. And I experienced that as well. And then I said, but guys, why is that your default version? My default version is the person comes back as soon as possible, and we need to make it work, and we need to make sure that we create the conditions. So my question would not be, so you're off, but it would be, so what are we going to do, right? And then you can still agree on what fits and what does not fit. But my default version would never be, this is a problem and this is why we have to consider it.
but that is really the Austrian story, is that you have a lot of women that would stay 2 or 3 years at home, and that is an issue for a company. I mean,
I agree, but it's the interesting thing is when I approached the women differently, and I said, "What are we going to do?" And then she said, "Oh, you asking me?" And I say, "Yes, sure. So what is your appetite? What do you want? How can we make it work?" So I do believe that the default version also brings many times women in the position to say, "There is no option for me, so now I'm off," versus saying, "What do you need? Let's make it work." And then a different thing starts.
Thank you very much. There is a very interesting and very general question. So, any of you who would deem it interesting? So, how do you keep your professional and private life in balance? Even you, Daniel. You have 2 kids.
Yeah, efficiency. Efficiency. And it's also priorities. And from my perspective, also flexibility in mind. Yeah, if you have a certain picture on how things have to be in professional and in private life, this creates incredible pressure, and you will feel exhausted very soon. And I think you need to have kind of flexibility, and also try to have a good culture in your family, not only in business life. And at the end, set the priorities right, because companies won't care for you when you're old.
Yeah, and I think it is important that you say this, and I think it's important to see what's how can you be authentic to yourself, because for me, as being skewed more to being more of an introvert, I see myself, I love these type of events. They're amazing. They're great for growing professional networks, and I love connecting with people, but I have to understand for myself, I need that time to recharge after things like this. So I have to schedule time, because if I don't do that, I'm going to be burnt out way faster. And then I'm going to show up to team meetings and the team's going to be like, what happened to Amelia? Why is she just sitting in the corner and just being completely exhausted? So it's also getting a sense from yourself, where does my energy lie, and how can I foster and keep my energy high, no matter if it's personal or professional.
Thank you, Amelia. There are quite some questions actually for you. I will pick up one because I think a lot of people will talk to you in one-on-one. When is the next accelerator program? So can you tell us in general, what are the timings and who would be eligible, right?
Yeah. So the program runs twice a year. We're currently in the selection phase right now. So the program's actually starting in the next 3 weeks. The next program starts then in October. Specific date I don't have, but it's usually always in April and October. So twice a year. And basically the focus is for us really tech focused. So we're really focused on femtech, climate tech, SaaS, these particular areas, and a little bit of fintech. And it's really for gender diverse teams. So there has to be at least one female in the founding team. And you're looking for your first, call it institutional round. So this is either you're at a pre-seed or seed phase.
Thank you, Amelia. And maybe last question, I would address it to you, Heike, because you have a research background plus now in a corporate. What are the characteristics of a good and respected female leader?
Well, I mean, we should not be stereotypic here, right? I think there is plenty ways of being a good female leaders, and we can also see if you just think about some women, they do have very different characteristics. I think what you need is a certain amount of resiliency. You need to be able to cope with different like expectations, to have a certain grain of that you really want to achieve something, you want to create a certain impact and stick to it, and then it's authentic. I have seen women who have thought so much about what it could be ideally, and they were trying to live up to something that was not theirs, and then you lose a lot of your power and your impact. So I think it comes to the core of what is it that I really want to do, what is my strength, what is my impact, and then you need this grain of resiliency to keep on going, and the rest is very individual, I would say.
Thank you very much, Heike. This is an amazing last inspiring answer, I would have to say. I would like to thank a lot Amelia and Daniel, Selma and Heike for a very inspiring conversation. I really feel good now. And I think they deserve a huge applause. But before we pick up the conversation in a less formal setting, I would like to just make a few announcements. So please join our events on 25th of April. We have Female Leaders Breakfast. We do not have such a sophisticated content such as today's panel, but it's just the occasion to come together, exchange ideas. And also on 15th of June, we have Lunch and Learn. It's a finance gym that will be organized by Bill and Ruston, our famous professors that you might know from the accounting classes, and give us an opportunity to a little bit reflect on the crisis and what does it mean for our personal finance. And as usual, I wanted to keep the best news for last. I would like to use this opportunity to announce our new Female Leaders Network Vice President. One of our founders of the network, Özlem Sensin, has agreed to step up as the Vice President and support the network further also in this role. Özlem is such a brilliant woman. She is somebody who is a huge giver. She's very much intrinsically focused on moving things forward. And also, knowing her a little bit privately, she's one of the smartest and hardest working people I know. She would study for the German exam and pass it in 1 week. She would also finish, true story. She would also finish a value proposition for a new banking product in a week with, I'm not kidding, 5,000 data points analyzed in this time frame. And what I love about her the most is she's very humble about who she is and what she does. And that's why I really am so excited to see her in this new role. Let's have fun.